Yo, sound check.
You sound okay.
All right. Welcome to the E&E podcast. This is your host Kyle. I'm met with Carl. And today we are going to get into the conversation about communication. How are you really
hmm
feeling? So, Carl,
Um,
before we get
I
started,
am a,
how are you really feeling?
I'm feeling good, but I am a terrible communicator. This is something I gotta work on.
Well, let's start with this. How are you really feeling? How do you feel about life? How do you feel about what's going on in your world? How are you feeling in general?
Well, to be fully honest, um, I've been trying to communicate better with my girlfriend. I find that there are times where I'm frustrated and she's frustrated at me, and I just have to take pause and remember to um to come correct and be kind. And I think me and her are doing pretty well right now. Um, my relationships with my family members are getting a little bit better, I think, as well. I used to find myself frustrated a lot with them, but now I find myself having to be patient and forgiving them when they do things that's just not right in my eyes. And I think that I'm becoming a better person because of it, but we still have a long ways to go.
Okay. So, how do you think communication, what role do you think communication plays in those dynamics with your girlfriend, with your family? Like, has communication been a important tool in your I lost my train of thought. How important is communication to the structure of your relationships?
It's absolutely important. It's the number one thing that you have to be able to do with someone that you're going to build a lasting relationship with. Um, when I was starting out with my girlfriend, I wasn't 100% honest with her. I thought if I put all my baggage out there, she would run for the hills. So I thought giving it to her in little bites would be easier for her to digest. Um, but I've come to realize that I have to lay it all out there because there's really no time to waste. And if she loves me for me, she'll accept the things that I believe are flaws about myself. Um, so yeah, communication is really big, and it's also helped with my family. So I would say if you're having any issues, you just have to be calm, communicate, remember that the other person has their own point of view, and it might not align with how you see things, but just take the time and be patient, listen to what their worries and concerns are. Maybe you could find common ground and figure it out together. To ask questions and to try to make um, relationships better between themselves and their peers and their family and like just open communication. That's all I gotta say about that.
The people who you're involved with, do you think they're good communicators? Do
Ooh,
you do you do you think do you think you're a good communicator?
me no, no. I'm honest when I say no. I'm not a good communicator. I have a hard time articulating my thoughts. My thoughts are all over the place. I speak faster than I think, so I tend to say words that don't exactly mean what I want it to mean in the moment. Like even now, I'm having a hard time. Um,
Yeah,
and the
that's why
people
I
around
pause.
me,
That's why I pause and stuff like that because When you give me a heavy topic, I can go in so many different directions, and I feel like it's all connected, and it's hard to know what to say first, because then it's going to be like, well, I should have said this or I should have said that. Like with many of the podcasts that we've put out so far, I can't tell you how many times I've listened back to our podcasts and I think to myself, man, I should have said this too. And man, I should have put this in there. And it's hard for me to articulate what it is I'm trying to convey. And I think it's the way I'm wired psychologically. I think in like pictures and movies. Like when a thought comes to my head, I see a picture. I don't see words. So I'm seeing the picture in my mind, and
Mm,
I'm trying to convert the picture in my head to words, and often I don't have all the words in my grasp to say the things that I want to say. So that's why I often
mm,
stumble over words, or I'll start a sentence and have to stop and redirect myself because I
mm,
realize, like, oh, that's not what I really want to say. I want to say something else. So there's a lot of starting and stopping. And then I have to try to convert those feelings or those pictures into language for other people to understand. But I'm sorry,
mm.
I cut you off. So
No, I
going
get
back.
it. Yeah, I totally get it. Like, I wish I had read more books so I had more things that I could think to say. But I was saying something about how I also feel like the people around me are not really good communicators. Like, for example, um, I think that as children we learn how to communicate from my parents and from school. And the one thing I wish I had growing up was more communication, more open dialogue between myself and my family members. I think they were very um, closed off. And I think being a kid who liked to get into mischief, I was very secretive. So,
Mm,
yeah, I wish I could go back and change that.
so Um, you already said that you have a hard time articulating what you want to say. What
Mhm.
else would you say kind of holds you up from being a good communicator? Or what else do you think holds other people up from being good communicators?
I think a lot of people are suffering in one shape or another. Like for me, I mean, I think it's my mentality growing up. See, I was a very overweight kid who had skin issues. Um, and because of those skin issues and the way I saw myself, I didn't feel comfortable talking to people because I was ashamed of how I looked. So
Hmm.
because I stayed away from people, I couldn't better my communication with others. And so, yeah, I feel like I've hurt myself in that way. But now that I'm older and I care less about how people see me, um, I think my communication skills have improved slightly. Mm,
So
right.
I sent you the notes a while back, right? And those notes I sent you, I said, what is communication? And I kind of narrowed it down to 5 steps. And I don't necessarily feel like you have to do these steps in order. But first, in order to communicate, I feel like you have to, you have to want to communicate. And um, at the beginning of this conversation, you said that you felt like people don't want to communicate.
Right.
When
Um,
people do communicate, it feels like the communication is broken.
right. They're afraid to open up. I feel, I'm speaking just for just me now. I feel like I have a hard time wanting to open up to people, but I'm trying to change that.
Some people, and this is something that me and my wife was just talking about yesterday, is she says that I'm a very complicated person and that um I think very, very deeply. You use the idea of when you first got with your girl, you wanted to share who you really were with her, but you didn't communicate all your details to her because you thought that she could only handle you in small doses. So, I think that highlights the first point really, really well because I think the reason why a lot of us don't communicate in general is because of a level of insecurity, or it's either like a level of insecurity that we have, or what do you think? Why do you think people don't communicate?
Um, they're afraid. They're not confident in the level of um they're afraid and they are not comfortable of letting people see that side of them.
Do you think it's shame that stops us from communicating?
Um, I think in my case, there might have been some shame, and that's what might have prevented me from communicating fully with my family in the past. And I believe others may have similar fears and thoughts of shame. So, yeah, shame could be one of the reasons why people don't communicate well.
So, if shame is possibly one of the reasons, then I think the next logical conclusion is I think with shame comes rejection.
Hmm. People
I
are afraid
think
of being rejected.
I think that's a lot of that. I think the reason why we don't communicate is because we're afraid that if we're really honest about what we think or what we feel, or uh if we're afraid to communicate our own authenticity, I think at the end of the day we're all afraid of being rejected.
Yeah, no one wants to be alone. No one wants to be left behind.
And nobody wants to have their true selves being rejected.
Right. Yeah.
So like
It,
you said,
mhm.
you only fed your girlfriend bits and pieces of yourself because you thought she could only handle you in small doses.
Yeah, I did not have the faith that if I put all of my self out there, that it'd be received well.
Hmm. So
What are you thinking?
a question I always ask you is what is there to be ashamed of?
Well, I guess right now I can't. Well, right now, the first thing I'm thinking of is when I was younger, I used to be overweight, and there was a pool in my middle school, and it was our turn to have the pool. I remember thinking, oh, I don't want to go in the pool. Uh, I'm fat. Uh, like, they're gonna laugh at me. I'm just gonna wear a shirt, and it's like, it's really hard sometimes being around kids who will poke fun and say what's on their mind and not care how it hurts another person. And so I've become afraid. I feel ashamed.
Mhm. So, do you think your um your experiences as a kid, do you think that has translated into your communication, and that once you've been picked on, once you've been teased, once people reject you in that way, you then kind of stretch that hmm,
You're
across
breaking up
all.
again, bro.
Check, 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 1 2, check 1 2. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's better now.
Okay. So you've had a childhood where you were picked on, you were teased. Have you, what it sounds like to me, honestly, because I was going to ask you a question, but what it sounds like to me is because you were teased as a kid, and was that a form of rejection for you?
Mm, yes, but it probably wasn't the first time I felt that,
So
you know.
were you being rejected when kids were teasing you?
Um, Kinda, yes. I mean, I definitely didn't want to be around the kids who made me feel like less than. And so I've closed myself off, kinda. Um, Stayed to myself and I don't know, lost a little bit of myself. And
So,
it happened early too. I could remember being really young and thinking of these things, like as early as maybe 5 or 6 years old.
so this is what I'm hearing from you. So, and I can see how this could translate into your adulthood too. So what I'm hearing from you is the same kid who was teased because of his skin condition, the same kid that was teased because he was overweight. What I'm thinking and feeling from hearing what you're expressing to me is it's not necessarily the feelings of rejection. It sounds to me like we don't like to be criticized.
Mm,
We don't like to be picked apart. We don't like to be exposed in a way where we don't like to be made we don't like to be made fun of. We don't like to feel ashamed for who and what we are and what we present to be. So, no, it does still kind of end up being a form of rejection, but it's not completely being rejected. I see a it's like I see a stain on you,
mm,
and we don't like the way it feels when people uh expose the stain.
right. Ooh, that reminds me, man. You've ever dropped food on your shirt and you
Just last
already
night.
went out, huh?
Just last
Just
night.
last night? And
Yep.
were you out of the house when this happened?
No, I was at home. I was wearing a white V-neck, and fortunately, it was an older white V-neck. And, the wife made burrito ramen. You
Mm-hmm.
know what happens when you slurp ramen? The juice goes all over the place and
Mm-hmm.
all over the white tea. And fortunately, I wasn't out in the open, but I definitely changed my shirt.
Imagine being out and not being able to change your shirt. And it's
Yeah,
happened to me a couple times.
and I'm not gonna lie, it would look sloppy, and it would definitely be cause for embarrassment.
Mm.
Because
I hate not looking right when I'm out and
what would
about.
people? Yep. What would people think? Grown man with spots all over his shirt.
Mm. I know this is kind of out there, but I want to tell you something really to me it was funny. I was probably around the age of 16, and I was talking to a relative of mine, and he goes and tells me a story one day, and I was just like, what the hell? He goes to me, he goes that his father taught him wh- when he goes out to make sure he looks fresh and looks good all the time. And, he didn't think anything of it. And his father would ask him before he would go out, let me take a look at you, just to make sure you look good. This relative of mine, he had this shirt that had a hole in it. And he was going to go out walking like that. He was going to walk out looking like that. He told me that one day his father came up to him. He said, come here, let me look at this shirt. Do you know you have a hole in your shirt? And he's like, yeah, I'm going to go out like this. And he said, you are? He took his finger, put it in the hole of his shirt, and ripped it bigger. And he said, no son of mine is going to walk out looking like that. You put on a
Mm,
brand new shirt. And so, like, from that moment on, he always made sure that his shirt was brand new, had no stains, no holes, or no nothing, because the way you present yourself is the way that people are going to see you. You go out looking sloppy, people are going to think of you as a sloppy person. And I just always kept that in my head. Like, I want to make sure I go out looking good.
so I heard bits and pieces of what you were saying.
Okay.
So, um, what I'm hearing from you is this was between your story was between who and who, your grandfather and your dad.
No, 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 no. This was
Sorry.
my cousin and his father.
Okay, so your cousin and his father, and his father said no son of mine is going to go out with a hole in his shirt, and when the son said that he was going to go out in that shirt, the father ripped a bigger hole in it and said basically go change.
Yeah.
So, why do you think his father reacted that way?
I believe when his father was growing up, it was a thing to always look good and fresh before you leave the house because first impressions were very important to the older generation. They would
Hmm.
go out to like job interviews with a suit on. They would go out looking nice. They would make sure their hair was always combed and they always had like aftershave on. Like it was a different time back then. And I guess he was trying to raise my cousin to be like him, to be, a nice gentleman that people would want to be around and say, damn, look at him. He must be doing well for himself, you know?
Yeah. So, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't try to present well, but I can only imagine what having your dad rip a bigger hole in your shirt would do to you.
I never thought about that then, you know? It, I'm thinking about it now, like, that's a little messed up, but
It
like,
sent a message.
yeah, it is. It makes you think, It could have really changed my cousin's mind state in one direction or another. And I
Right.
think it definitely for this particular person that I'm talking about, it definitely turned his life into a positive direction. I see it.
Mm. So, thank you for sharing that story. I'm trying to connect it back to the conversation.
I apologize.
No, 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 it's cool. So we were talking about how I think the reason why we don't communicate is because on one level or another, we don't want to be criticized, and ultimately we don't want to be rejected.
Mm,
But as we expressed in the beginning, communication is vital to dealing with one another, right?
right.
So, why? Hmm. So, I guess that we have it's like a tug of war. We know we need to communicate, but I guess the question is what and why? So,
Repeat that.
um, we need to communicate, but what do we communicate and why do we communicate it?
Hmm.
So, what do we need to communicate? So, that's a broad question to ask.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Hell yeah.
let's frame it in the realm of relationships, right? So, you're in a relationship, I'm in a relationship. What what do we communicate? What do we need to communicate and why?
Well, I guess for me, in a relationship with my girlfriend, I want to communicate um, patience. So when she's talking to me and I'm getting frustrated, I literally say, okay, I'm going to take this moment to listen to what you have to say. And then after you're done, I am going to think about what you said and respond accordingly. I want to communicate that if she's having a bad day, that I'm gonna be there for her whenever she is ready. I will communicate whatever it is that's bothering her and help her any way I can. I also want to communicate that if I wanted um, some of that, that if she's not feeling well, that's okay. We have the rest of our lives. It's like there's no rush to that because it's more than just that. It's more than just the flesh. It's about how she makes me feel inside, and I want her to feel the same way.
So, what happens when there's a breakdown in communication between you and her, or what? Because I want to broaden this out. What happens when there's a breakdown in communication between you and your family?
Oh,
What are the results?
right away I feel stress. That's the one thing I don't want to feel in my life is stress because I'm stressed out all the time. Stressed out whether I am gonna make the deadline, whether I am smelling good, acting right, speaking well. Everything breaks down if I am stressed out about how a family member or girlfriend treated me.
Hmm.
Um, so I want to communicate and try to figure out a solution to whatever it is that's bothering me so I can move forward happier and um, have my mind clear of whatever's bothering me.
So, when there's a breakdown in communication, there's a lack of peace.
Yeah, there's lack of peace in my heart and my mind.
And that goes for just about everybody who you're in connection with, right?
Right,
So,
yeah.
if there's a breakdown in communication with you and your mom, if there's a breakdown in communication with you and your girl, if there's a breakdown in communication with you and your grandma, if there's a breakdown in communication with whoever, typically what results from a breakdown in communication is yours or other people's needs aren't being met, and what happens is because of a lack of communication, there is room for discrepancy.
Yep. Yes.
And in order for you to bridge those gaps, you need to communicate. But what often stops you from being able to communicate?
Mm. It could be a number of things.
So, like, I don't want to put your business out there, but you've already given me an example a number of times of how I'll just use my relationship. There's a lack of peace and unity in my relationship when me and my wife aren't communicating.
Mm.
And what typically stops us from communicating is our inability to articulate what it is we actually want from each other.
Mm.
So let me go down my list of points again because I stopped on communicate. Steps to communicate. First, you got to communicate. Second, you need to articulate what it is you actually want.
Mm. And that's the hardest thing for me to do.
And then third, which is the biggest part. So it's one thing to begin to articulate what it is you want. The third part is we have to comprehend. It's one thing to articulate what you want, it's another thing to comprehend what's being said. The
Mm-hmm.
word the word articulate, give me a second. Oops. Playing around in my notes here. The word articulate means having or showing the ability to speak fluently and coherently. So I know in my past communication, I wasn't able to speak fluently what it is my thoughts and feelings were.
Mm.
Uh, I would often have feelings or thoughts, and because I wasn't able to frame them in a way where they would flow fluently from my mind and my heart, I would often give my wife, for instance, bits and pieces of the way I was thinking and feeling. The way this had shaped my relationship with my wife is, especially in the heat of the moment, in like arguments or in moments where we weren't seeing eye to eye, I would feel something or I would think something, and because I couldn't articulate or frame a full thought from beginning to end, I would often say things that were partial truths or partial
Mm-hmm.
statements.
I get
So,
it. I
like
have
we,
situations like that where when my girlfriend is coming at me and she's yelling at me, I find myself not able to articulate everything I want to say because she's cutting me short. She's talking over me or at me, and I quickly want to say something that's not like the full thought process that I had. It's just like a quick little sentence. And it's not exactly what I want to say, but it's the only words that I could throw out really quickly because I want her to hear me. I
yep,
want her to know that I have more to say, but she just is not ready to hear everything that I want to say.
yeah.
And that sucks.
So, third part that I'm going to put in is listen. Listen to hear. Or actually, it's listen to comprehend. So, first you need to communicate, articulate what it is that you want to say. And that's really hard to do when you're in a confrontation, especially with your girl.
Mm,
I get the same thing where you guys are rapid firing at each other, and you guys are cutting each other off. And I can't speak for you, but I can only speak for myself. When I'm in rapid fire, just rapidly firing whatever it is that comes to my head, I often get deeper into trouble.
Yeah.
Is that the case for you?
Yeah. So I have to pause and just let her speak. Because me pausing also lets me get a moment to calm down and remember that I gotta come correct.
Yeah. So once you articulate what it is you want to say, one or both of you should come to a space where you actually stop and listen. And I think that's also so not only do we have a hard time communicating what it is we want to say because maybe there is some shame or fear of criticism, we can't articulate what it is we want to say because I'm not going to share his experiences. But what spawned this episode was one of my friends had a breakdown in communication with two different individuals. And when he asked them, he had a breakdown in communication with two people. And when he asked one of them to articulate what it is that was bothering him, basically what happened was is the person he was talking to couldn't articulate what it was that was bothering him, and it turned into the person he was talking to getting more aggressive, getting more upset, and that person kept saying, "You don't understand, you don't get it."
I still have
And
arguments like that to this day.
right, so I've been in that situation where I want to communicate with my spouse. I want to communicate with this family member. I want to communicate with this person at my job. And
Mm.
even when you give them an opportunity to communicate, because they can't articulate what they're trying to say, it leads to frustration for everybody involved. Because then, especially if you're dealing with somebody who, um, I don't know if it's a lack of maturity or if it's
There's several factors. I mean, um, when you get older, you're gonna become forgetful. You have to be mindful that if you're speaking to someone who's older, you're probably not gonna remember half the stuff you're telling them anyway. And also, I'm not really sure if this is fact, but the younger generation, they probably have more cases of ADHD now than ever before because of all of social media and stuff. So it's probably really hard for younger kids right now to communicate what they want and what they're thinking because they don't really have like um the same upbringing that our older generations had, where they were forced to communicate, whether in face to face or over the telephone. You know, they had to develop those skills, and I've definitely feel like I'm lacking those skills.
well, I agree. I don't know if I really I want to
You
agree
could
with you, but I
disagree if you
also
want.
yeah, I kind of disagree though because without naming any names, I'm just thinking across all the people I know. It seems like it seems like everybody has a hard time communicating, even the adults. Even the people we consider our adults, the people older than us.
Mm,
Um, we've had conversations before where we talk about how a lot of the trauma or a lot of our childhood experiences or even our current experiences come from a lack of communication. People with, communication with people that are older than us. So while I agree that social media has hurt communication, a lot of the adults in our lives or a lot of the people who are our um seniors, like they don't know how to communicate either.
Mm.
You know, like I said, I'm not gonna put anybody out on the carpet because I often have a habit of using the people you've given me examples of in
Well,
conversation.
you mind if I say who I've had problems communicating with?
Go for it.
I've had problems communicating with two people as well. Um, for some reason, I've been having a hard time communicating with my girlfriend and my mother.
Mhm. There you go.
Um, I don't know what
One
it
is
is.
one is in your age group and one is older than you.
Hmm.
So your mom didn't grow up with social media.
Right.
So why can't or why do you guys have a hard time communicating?
I believe that my mother has a hard time communicating with me because she wasn't given the tools to communicate properly. She is dealing with her own baggage. And I feel like because her and I never really established that close bond that you have with your child, like a parent would have with their child, excuse me. Um, it really hurt us to this day. Really, really hurt us to this day. I mean, like there are times to this day where I think, man, I wish I could go back and um learned to speak to my mom, learn to hug my mom, to wish her well, to tell her Bendy strong before she leaves. Like all these things that I would hope that would be already present in my life right now, I am lacking. And
Mm.
I'm so frustrated that I don't have that connection with her. And it's
So
not her fault. It's not my fault. It just became that way because we just didn't have the tools to bring it together.
so the steps to communicate. First, you communicate. Second, you have to articulate. It actually should be different.
It
I
should be
think
different.
steps to communicate. First, it should be to articulate. Then it should be to communicate. Then
I
it should be to listen.
I thought it was to listen first.
Well, I mean, someone has to speak first.
Well, yeah,
So,
then you comprehend what they're saying, and then you're able to articulate a
and
response.
then you have to show understanding or have empathy,
Hmm.
which means you have to do your best to put yourself in their shoes and feel what they feel, because if you feel what they feel, you're you're I feel if excuse me, I feel like if you comprehend what's being said, so you know what's being said, and if you try to understand it on a level of empathy where you put yourself in that person's shoes, you're more able to come up with a mutual decision that will benefit both parties. So, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, first, you need to list. Oh, sorry. You're messing
You
me all
do.
over
You do
people's.
need to listen, though. I'm serious.
Okay, so let's say you listen. So then you listen, you can articulate what's being said, you can articulate what you want to say, then you communicate it. You want to make sure that you comprehend what's being said, and you want to understand and comprehend it from a level of empathy.
Yeah,
So
from their point
maybe
of view.
these steps aren't steps in order. Maybe you want to do all these things at the same time. But it's important that I feel like the main thing is you want to be empathetic. You want to be able to
Hmm.
put yourself in that person's shoes and feel what they feel, because if you feel what they feel, you're more likely to come out with a mutually beneficial outcome. So
Mm-hmm.
my question to you is where do you think the breakdown in communication happens with you and your mom, for instance?
Um, I feel like there is certain points, like a certain point of view that I want to make her aware of. There's a certain way of um. Hold on, let me go back. I feel like when I'm speaking to my mom, there is a point of view that I want to share with her so she can understand where I'm coming from. But when she gives me her point of view, either it's not the full story or she withholds stuff from me, so I don't quite understand where she's coming from. On the other
Hmm.
hand, there's times where she'll come at me incorrect and I'm just like, "Oh, it's going to be one of those days. All right, let me let me walk in the path of someone who understands where you're coming from, can listen and respond to how you're feeling."
So, okay, so I was gonna direct it in this way. I was gonna say, do you feel like there's a problem with her empathizing with you?
Hmm. Um, maybe. I'm not in her head, so I don't know if she doesn't empathize with me. I surely empathize with her. I mean, I know the things that she's struggling with because I seen it. I grew up around it. I know what it looks like. And when there's a breakdown in communication, I understand just it's just the way it is because she just doesn't have those skills yet. Or maybe she does and I don't have the skills yet. I don't know, but all I know is that I'm trying to be patient and kind and give her a little bit of little space. Cause
Yeah.
yeah, I also know that if I when I go to my mom and I start really focusing on what I'm saying and trying to use logic and reason, I don't know what it is, but my mother comes back with emotion and uh, it just doesn't come off the way I imagine it.
We're all sentimental creatures. We're all sentimental creatures about one thing or another. And it's like the question is why are you triggered over this? And if you are triggered, is this something that you can fix on your own, or does it really require me to make a change? And that requires you to actually care about the person you're talking to.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like to me that your mom is always, or just about always, in her own feelings.
Oh yeah, my mother suffers from mental illness, and so I had to learn what it's like to be around someone with mental illness. Um, it's tough
Well, let me ask you
because
something,
uh
if you don't mind me stopping you there. Um, you call it a mental illness. Is being always in your feelings a sign of a mental illness?
hmm,
Because
it is a sign.
I know people who are always in their feelings.
Okay.
And to me, when someone's always in their feelings, what that tells me is that they are self centered. I'm not necessarily saying that they are, well, no, I'm not saying that they're bad people, but they
Mm,
are self centered. They are selfish.
mm-hmm.
you know, and I know being selfish tends to come off as bad in our society. I know
Mm,
being self centered comes off as being negative in our society.
mm-hmm.
And maybe this is a whole different conversation in itself, but you're talking about somebody who is self centered, which means they're so consumed in their own feelings. I've always said to people who come off as self centered or selfish or only in their feelings, you're so in your feelings that you don't have room in your heart and or in your mind for anybody else's feelings,
Mm,
because you're so worried about you and getting what you want that you can't begin to comprehend being in a mutual relationship, because right now you're focused on getting out of the relationship or getting out of the situation what you want or what you need. It doesn't necessarily have to be something bad that they want. It's just they have needs that need to be met and they're so focused and mentally centered on what they want or what they need that there's no room for mutual uh like a mutual transaction.
hmm. Yeah, a wise man once told me that I should try to just be selfless and do for my girl whatever she wants for an entire day and just see what the results are. And I gotta tell you, when I stopped worrying about myself and just did whatever I thought my girl would want, man, she was happier and I was happier. It
Hmm.
wasn't like,
How
oh
about that?
man, I did this thing for my girl. I want something in return. I got it. I got it. And all I had to do was be kind.
Mm. We had a conversation 2 episodes ago, I think, where we were talking about the 5 things that everyone wants. And
Are these are these the five pillars?
no,
Oh,
these are the 5 things that all men want.
oh yes, yes, I remember now.
And one of the things that I think everybody wants is they want understanding and grace, right?
Right.
And we're really off topic now, but I think the reason why we have a breakdown in communication when we are dealing with people who are self-centered, it's very hard to meet in the middle and be mutual with each other.
Hmm.
And I think the breakdown in communication happens because they're so focused on them, they can't empathize with you. And you know, you said a wise man once told you, if you stop focusing on yourself and you focus on your girl, then ultimately what you want, you end up receiving anyway, because when you focus on their needs, what ultimately happens is if you're in a good relationship with somebody who wants to be mutual, once they receive their needs, they're more willing to give of themselves. Has that been your experience?
Yes.
So in your situation with your girl, what was the switch?
Um, I think it was when I gave her space to when I gave her space to communicate with me and I was less Um, I was less demanding, less selfish. When I became more of a friend to my girlfriend, like there was a time where I looked at my girlfriend as she's my partner in life and I'm gonna treat her as such. But I started to forget that she's also my best friend. And I did not like treating my best friend the way I was treating my girlfriend. I was
Mm.
I was frustrated, jealous. I was feeling very needy, and I wanted to let all that go because it wasn't helping our relationship at all.
So it's interesting, right? So I'm thinking about the I'm thinking about the I'm thinking about the situations that inspired this conversation,
Hmm.
and then I'm thinking about what you just said, and I'm thinking about the people that I know who are self-centered, right? And they are you said that you were needy.
Oh yeah, very.
You were needy.
Hmm.
And what were those needs that you felt like you were trying to fulfill?
At the time, I needed a lot of help. I needed help with um my finances. I needed help with my medical stuff. I needed help with someone who would be there to listen. And I put a lot of that burden on my girlfriend.
Mm.
And I had to take some of that and lighten her load. In fact, it was on me to get my finances right. It was on me to make sure I made my medical appointments on time. It was on me to learn how to communicate better with my girlfriend. It wasn't on her plate. And once I put all that stuff on my plate, started to eat that shit, things started getting better because she was less stressed. There was less for her to do and more time for us to come together.
Right. So this turned into more than just communication. This is turning into a different conversation, I think entirely, which is you know, you took responsibility for your own life, and when you took responsibility for your own life, it act it actually made room for your relationship,
Hmm.
because instead of you looking at your relationship as the source of your solutions to your problem, you handled your problems, and now there was just room for your relationship. There was just room for you to be with her, and if she was able to assist you, then great. If she wasn't able to assist you, okay. I still love you though. I'm still going to be there for you though. I'm still going to call you though, right? Like, that sounds like that was your mentality.
Mm, yeah. But the communication, I mean, that's the most important thing about any kind of relationship, whether it be romantic, whether it be with your family or with a coworker. If you can't listen and comprehend what's being said, how are you going to be able to articulate and be able to have open dialogue with that person and develop a closer bond with that person? And being
Hmm.
silent and not saying what's on your mind is not going to help the situation. In fact, I'm more honest with my girlfriend now than ever. I think
Me too.
that
I'm more honest with my wife than ever.
now that I've told my girlfriend everything, I could now not worry about that baggage or the skeleton in the closet because it's all out there already.
So, we're talking about communication. So, the steps to communicate, not necessarily in order, but you need to listen, you need to want to communicate, you need to articulate, you need to comprehend, to know what's being said, and you have to understand. We talked about how communication is important. When there is no communication, there seems to be a breakdown in relationship. We talked about how between you and your mom, there's a breakdown in relationship because of a lack of communication.
Mm-hmm.
I highlighted how when people are kind of self-centered, it's hard to be in relationship with one another because you're busy focused on you. You
Right.
expressed how when you, like in your relationship with your girl, when you started to focus on her rather than yourself, things got better. But I can hear my family getting up in the background, so I'm gonna get ready to sign off. So, um, really fight to. Uh, I'm trying to pull up my notes one more time before we close. The goal is to communicate. So first, you gotta want to communicate. You gotta speak your thoughts. The hard part is to articulate your thoughts. So you got to really take the time, and in my case I got to talk in order to get my thoughts out there. I got to bounce ideas off of people, and that's the way I think. So learn how you articulate, then articulate in a way where other people can listen and comprehend, and try to be understanding with people, because we all coming from different backgrounds. So we none of us get it completely right, but
Mm-hmm.
as long as you're willing to, you know, love your neighbor as yourself, and try to meet on common ground, communication is possible. I see it in my family life.
Yeah, yeah. That's good.
So thanks for
Um,
tuning in to the E&E podcast.
yeah, everybody take care. God bless. Love you all.
All right, man.
Bye.
Peace.
Peace.